Hello, everybody. Welcome to 3 Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
I'm Lee White.
And I'm Samantha Cotterill, and let's jump into it.
Great. All right. Well, Lee, you take charge here because this one's your idea.
Yeah. So I wanted to do this idea. For those of you guys who don't know, we are live within our community. So like Jake was saying earlier, that 3 of our podcasts are just recorded whenever the hosts can sort of plan on a time. But once a month, we have a live podcast recording within the SVSLEARN community where you can ask live questions. We've got a whole group of people here right now who can, they're seeing this as we go. And so my idea was today is to address some of the things that this group deals with, and, everybody deals with it, but within SVS, we have a contest every month called How to Fix Your Art. You guys may have heard about it. We talk about it all the time, but typically it's a prompt, and it varies on whether it's a design prompt or a story-based prompt, but whatever. It's an illustration contest once a month just for fun, where people can try to make a portfolio piece in the style they're going into, and then address the concept. Now, I do want to just address why that is important, because a lot of time, and I've seen this a lot with art schools that I've been lecturing at, and I go do portfolio reviews. Sometimes art school is really sort of do whatever you want school. And that can be good because you learn some things, you find your way, you find your passions and stuff like that. The drawback for that kind of art school is people never end up challenging themselves to do something that they might not be comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. I am going through that exact experience through my son right now. He just transferred into a new school from 2 years experience at a different college. That was a very liberal arts kind of education. And while it was great for a lot of kids, for him, it was almost too much like what you had just mentioned. And right. He needed what you're also talking about. So he transferred to a different school, which has kind of shifted gears and is giving him more of the instructional stuff that he really is craving. And it's funny because I'm literally living what you're just saying right now.
It's an interesting predicament because, we naturally avoid pain and we naturally seek what's enjoyable, right? And so an example of where this goes wrong, which I've seen in art school specifically, is like, say somebody sets out to make a character set for the Wizard of Oz. They're going to redesign the Wizard of Oz. They get, a couple hours into it and they're like, oh my gosh, this is way harder than I thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. And then they show up the next week in class and like, okay, here's my new Star Wars characters. And you're like, wait, I thought you were doing Wizard of Oz. And they're like, oh no, that was too hard. I just switched it. And so, and that's okay in art school. It's really weird how teachers will let people do that. But it's detrimental in my opinion. Because at some point you got to address sort of the elephant in the room that I need to address, design these characters for this specific, there's no client in the world that will say, oh yeah, just do what you want. If you run into problems, just change whatever you're doing. Doesn't happen.
I kind of feel like more art schools, and maybe there could be a shift in this. I don't want to just whole cloth say all art schools are bad, but when you go to art school specifically learning something like animation or learning all the different components of animation, whether it's lighting, the actual animation part, modeling, concept art, things like that, it's a little more like a trade school where it's like, we're going to set you up with projects that actually replicate what you're going to be doing out in the field. And that way, those students get a much better understanding of what the job is actually like and what the demands of it are going to be.
Right. And so it's more practical hands-on training. And a couple of times you're going to flop, but because of that sort of failure, that's how you get better. Or you realize like, oh my gosh, I struggled with this. Where's the weakness? So anyway, so my thought for today's podcast is the longest way possible to say this is, we're going to go into some of the top mistakes that we see just as a pattern. It's not any one person or anything like that, but just as a pattern overall from the students, the top mistakes we see from looking at, at this point, wouldn't you say, Jake, it's literally thousands of entries, right?
Yeah. If you include, critique arena as well for how many years we did that?
It's years. Yeah.
I mean, the two, they're one and the same, right? Essentially.
Yeah, we've had different versions of what this contest looks like monthly, but it's always been a challenge, a specific challenge to address, and we see some very it's funny because before I started going down the art route and I was studying illustration, I would have said every artist is different and they're unique, and they are in some aspects, but overall, most people make the same mistakes at the same point in their career. So at the point where you can almost spot, like one thing that me and my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time when I was in art school, but one thing we would do at the scholarship review, it was a big portfolio day on the school, is we would go around and just from looking at the art, we'd try to guess which term people are in. There was 8 terms from 1st to 8th. And I swear, by the end, I would say we probably had maybe an 80% success rate just based on how it looked on the wall. We'd say they're in 3rd term. They haven't had this class yet. They have had this class. They're struggling here. And we go up and look at it. Oh, yeah, they're in 3rd term, Yeah. So anyway, there's some consistencies that happen. And the beauty of that is we can address those things as a big overarching sort of umbrella.
Mm-hmm. And have you noticed? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Have you noticed also in terms of just subject matter that students tend to choose? You can also kind of sense where the growth has occurred in terms of how to communicate a feeling without using a more stereotypic composition. So for me, it's always been like people huddled in a corner or in a box or hunched over. There's certain things that I see in
sort of hallmarks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the starting out experience where you're trying to express this feeling of alone, of loneliness, but it's usually through these kinds of means in the start, and then you learn how to kind of expand your library.
It's really interesting to see that. I've actually expanded that idea to, like, as I'm looking at Instagram now, I try to see where people are in their careers. It's always recommending you follow people or whatever. And sure enough, just yesterday, I saw this person who just got a new agent. And so the agency, and so this is a pro, it's an early pro, but I don't know that it's an early pro at this point, but I just see that this agent is representing this artist, and the work looked pretty cool. And I clicked on it and I was like, recent grad. And then I clicked on her website, recent grad. She just graduated from RISD. Good. But you can spot these different stages that people are at. It's kind of fun to do. Which is weird. You'd think that art is so specific and individual, but it's really not. It's like music or anything else. You go through very specific patterns of learning. Should we dive into it?
Let's do it. I want to hear.
Let's do it.
Okay, we're going to start with big picture kind of stuff. Story is always the first thing that we're concerned with, because it doesn't matter how you render the shoelaces on some character if the story is kind of weird. The number one thing that I see for story, and we're just freestyling here just with general ideas and themes, but the big thing that I see is a confusing situation where the average person who just stumbles upon this illustration has no idea what's happening.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And even when like specifically for how to fix your art or any illustration, when you know the prompt already, like for how to fix your art, oftentimes our prompts will be like, it'll sound like it's a passage from a storybook. Like, they were all laughing, but she didn't know why. That would be the prompt. And we do tell people, be creative, show us something unexpected, but that still fits with it. And that's, kind of a tall order, but that's what illustration is you want to surprise people and excite people. But we would still give back, and we still have this happen where we'll get an illustration, we know the prompt, and we still can't quite figure out why, what's the thing causing these people to laugh, for that prompt, and how can she not know that, So you really do have to, I think the solution to that is you got to run it by someone other than yourself. Show your partner, show your friend, show your kid. If your kid can understand it, then you're doing pretty good, right? And
be okay if they don't understand it too, because a lot of times it's been with you from the conception all the way to the final. So for you, it might make complete sense and be very obvious. And it can be hard, especially in the beginning of your career, when you show it to somebody and they say, I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. And you can go on the defensive and be like, how can you not understand? And it does take a lot of, it is a maturity thing in terms of growth as an artist, of being able to recognize and understand that just because you completely get it, you are not the one that's going to be picking up this book for the first time or picking up this illustration for the first time. And you do need to make sure that they know what's going on as well. And it may be something that needs to be refined because no one else that you show it to gets what's happening. And that can be a hard pill to swallow at times when you haven't experienced that before.
It's tough. It is so hard. One thing I want to point out is, like, you know, what happens in these small challenges can be looked at as training for bigger projects. And so how I've seen that play out from going to SCBWI conferences and things like that is exactly what Sam was just saying, is that you've sat with a story for the last year. You've switched characters around, you've moved plot points and all this stuff. So when somebody at an SCBWI conference who you've never talked to comes up and says, what are you working on? You go right into the details of this thing, and they have no orientation to what you're talking about. It might even be an editor or an art director that you might be pitching this thing to, but you haven't trained getting people on the same page with an image. And that translates to not being able to get people on the same page in a bigger project, which really does delay people's careers, in my opinion. Yeah. Learning how to pitch things, I guess, is what I'm saying. Like saying, hey, this illustration is about this, and this is how it relates to the prompt. Just practicing that will enable you to later say, hey, this book is generally about one sentence, that if somebody's on the elevator with you and they're the biggest art director in the world and you pitch it, they're like, oh, that sounds interesting, I'm on board. And then you go into the details. So there's a pattern there. And that's why these little training sessions are really good, the monthly training sessions, because it prepares you for the bigger stuff and making sure everybody's on board before the train leaves the station. One of the things that we are going to talk about how to fix this stuff. Like Jake said, recruiting people to look at the illustration who have no idea of what's going on is going to be a great one. The other thing is, a lot of our focus is children's publishing, young adult fiction, novels, and stuff like that. So that means type can play a part in it. And if I am submitting an illustration and I know this prompt is too weird, or that my image is sort of too weird, I'll think, okay, maybe I integrate the type into it. And then all of a sudden there's a sentence that literally tells you what's happening. And all of a sudden everybody's oriented. So don't avoid adding type, especially within the genre that we typically focus in at SVS. Yeah. All right. So yeah, the confusing situation is one to get over. Okay. The next one is sort of, I don't know if it's worse than the confusing situation, because sometimes the confusing situation is at least interesting. My next problem with story that I see is the absolute cliche, or something that's not interesting in any way, even if you know what's going on and it does relate to the prompt, maybe even one-to-one. It's perfect. Like we did hanging from a thread. If you drew someone hanging from a thread, we're in trouble. Right?
Well, I mean, the thing is if it's if you're going to go straight on the nose with it, your drawing and illustration style has to be so compelling and so fun to look at and so engaging that it's okay that you're just hitting the prompt exactly how it is.
Well, you're saying you got to set the stage. If you're going to go that route, it really has to be custom built for that.
Yeah.
Right. So I could see you doing, like, if you were doing Hanging by a Thread, Lee White, what would you do for that one? And you were going to actually show a character hanging by a literal thread.
Oh, man. Well, the first thing, I don't know what I would literally draw, but I would think, what's an unexpected way to hang from a thread? The other thing I would do is I would make a list of what I call top card solutions, which is no brain that but you got to write them down. They're cliche and they're illustrations that I wouldn't do, but I need to get them out of my system. So like things like a spider hanging down on a web, I would not paint that. You're like Jake said, you could nail it with the illustrations and the lighting and color and all that, but it's already just such a boring idea.
Mhm.
We all know that spiders hang from threads. And so I wouldn't do that one. And so then I'd start thinking, well, what will most people think of when they think of hanging by a thread? And what can I do that's different than that? And that's the path that I start. That's my favorite part of an illustration, by the way, is I'm not even drawing yet. I'm writing down keywords and notes and locations even.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, well, there's, we did the idea of a tree house on one of these prompts, and even everybody thinks of a tree house typically in the summer. You think of a very specific kind of cliche treehouse, but you think of the same treehouse in the middle of winter, and what's that scene look like? Is somebody abandoned the treehouse? Has somebody? Is it in a snowstorm? Has somebody made it a sanctuary? But all of a sudden, you have
like candles in the window, and
right. There's so many more ways to play it out if you just change that time frame, or just change what's expected of the viewer in the illustration.
Yeah.
So,
and you have an opportunity with illustration to really bring in connection with the viewer in terms of enabling them to extrapolate their own experiences. And so in terms of like hanging by a thread, if you kind of go beyond the literal interpretation of it and you think of, oh, I'm just hanging by a thread and the emotion of hanging by a thread, and you do something based on that, you are no doubt going to connect with even more people because they can relate to that in their own life. And there's something about the emotive connectability in terms of art that is just something you want to kind of cash in on because it just elevates it to an even higher level.
Yeah.
I tried to sound artsy fartsy right now.
You did. You sounded very sophisticated.
I didn't even understand what I was saying as I was saying it.
If you're going to say that sentence, you need to add the word duality.
Duality.
That's what every good art critique. It's got the duality of good and bad, light and dark.
My head, as I was saying those, was thinking, are those actually real words I'm saying? I don't know if they're actually real words, but they sound good, so I'm going to say them.
I'm curious for our live audience here, if you could in the chat, just tell us what your approach is when it comes to storytelling. Like, where do you feel like it's clicking, and where do you feel like it is like you have a hang up there? I'd really love to know what that is.
Well, I got one more if they want to mull that over too while they're typing, and that is it sort of goes a little bit along with confusing situation, but it's sort of its own unique problem, and that is trying to tell too many stories or too much story at once. And so I mean, when we have one shot, you got one image, you are trying to include everything but the kitchen sink. For example, we did one a few months ago that had 3 individual prompts within a sentence. It was like they tumbled, they flipped, and they somersaulted, or it was something like that. There was 3 different things, and they landed at the end. And so I think the general tendency there is like, okay, it said they flipped, so I need to draw somebody flipping. They did somebody doing, whatever the next word was, they need to do that one, and then landing. And so you need to show all 3 of those things at the same time because it says that. But really, the illustrator's job is to extract a moment of a text. It doesn't mean illustrate all of the text. It just means add to the feeling of what the text is. It doesn't mean illustrating what the text says. Does that make sense?
That is something that I see a lot. And I think I was probably even quite guilty of that in the start as well, because you have this natural tendency to just, this is what the words say, so let me draw what the text is saying right now. And you're missing such a huge opportunity to really enhance the text because the words are already telling you that. You don't need to just then double back in the illustrations, use the illustrations to just pinpoint a specific moment of that, or even take the text somewhere that the words alone don't do. The words are already there. They tell you what's happening, but what can you do to elevate the text? And it is just real estate that is such a really wonderful opportunity to be able to do that. And I think that's definitely a muscle that needs to really get worked, because in the beginning, especially with picture books, I found that I would buy picture books and I would never read the texts. I was just looking at the pictures, and I would always say, I don't really read the words. I'm just looking at the pictures because they're so pretty. And then years in, I realized how much of a disservice that was, because there were so many brilliant books that I wasn't learning how these brilliant illustrators were taking the text and choosing to illustrate a particular moment. And it took me so long to finally make that connection and go, wait a second, it is the whole package together. And it's so boring if we're just basically mirroring what we're seeing in word form. And that's definitely one of the biggest things I've noticed as well.
Yeah. I want to read some of the comments coming here, some comics here. So David says, I like the brainstorming thumbnailing, but I tend to fall short in the execution. So that's good. That is a solvable problem, because if we read Alice, she says, being too liberal with the prompts and then jumping into drawing and rendering and not taking more time to think and thumbnail, that can be a problem. So sometimes a poorly executed idea can be better than a really well rendered bad idea. Roxy says she starts with a mind map, which is kind of what Lee was, essentially what you're saying, Lee, when you do the top card sort of idea thing that's just like brainstorm and free thought. And
I actually use a mind map. Speaking of that, I use some software called Mind Map, and it's fantastic.
Oh, right. I remember you showing me that a couple of years ago.
It's a visual representation of it. So you might have, you start with a middle word like Valentine's Day, and then you'll just pull a line off of it. And it's actually a line, you can move that line around on your page. And you can say, whatever, chocolates, and then you can dive down more. And so it's this really, it becomes this really organized version of, you get a bunch of words, you get like 50 words on the page. That can be overwhelming. And by having them spread around the page in these threads, sort of, so to speak, it keeps it usable, I guess.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I want to say really quickly before I forget, another aspect people don't really think about with text is the fun that you can have with really contrasting the text. Like if you have, it was so hot outside, and then you draw somebody in the snow frozen, you can have a lot of fun with the text by going against it with intention, or just see it as some kind of like putty to work with to create something that the image alone can't give you and the text alone can't give you, but together it does something really elevated. And
I like Mabel's comment here too. Thumbnailing has been a best friend of mine to really help with storytelling. I also try to follow the comic advice of being able to understand a gist of what is going on without words. Can I say too, the other thing is when you're sort of given a prompt that might have a lot of elements to it, or you're trying to tell a story, one of the things that I always try to think of is a story has a beginning, middle, and end, right? And as an illustrator, you can't show the beginning, middle, and end in one illustration. You have to pick. And a lot of times we see, and one of the big mistakes we see is the illustrator, the novice illustrator is going to pick the middle. And when you pick the middle, it's the hardest one to really wrap your head around as a viewer, because the middle doesn't show what's going to happen, and it doesn't quite show what caused the thing to happen. It's sort of the middle of the mess. Whereas if you pick the beginning, there's all this anticipation, and the person looking at it is like trying to figure out where this is going to go. So, imagine the prompt is manhole, right? And so I could see a guy reading a newspaper walking down the street, and his foot is just about to step on an open manhole with the construction going on or something like that. That is an illustration that gets you all like anticipating what the heck is going, is he going to fall in? How's this going to play out? Right. The middle would be showing a guy actually falling into it. And so you've taken kind of the wind out of the sail of the story when you're showing that, because you didn't get in the anticipation and you already know what's going to happen. He's going to fall in there. But you can also show the aftermath. And that is kind of cool because it's a puzzle to solve. So if you show a guy in the sewer and he's soaking wet and he's like, picking up his newspaper out of it, and you're like, wait, what? How's this happen? And then you look up at the top of the illustration, you see an open hole, and you see a construction worker, looking in there or something like that. Then you realize, oh, this guy fell in, right? So that's where you get drama. That's where you get intrigue. That's where you get the engagingness, is picking that before or that after.
Can I say that that's one of my favorite methods, or when I watch a show, that's one of my favorite techniques for pulling the viewer in immediately, is they start after whatever the event happened. And then you see all this devastation or whatever the case may be. And then it goes back to the start and they're having coffee and it says 2 days earlier. And you're like, okay, what happened? I gotta know. This is one of my favorite ones. When I started paying attention to these 3 individual moments, this was the one that really alerted me to it. I love it. It's so subtle. And are you seeing my screen?
I got to move this to another window.
To the other screen so I can see it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so it's a picture. Describe it to us.
Okay, so it's from Edward Gorey, who somehow got into publishing, before. This book would never be published now, because it's basically these kids meeting very unfortunate ends in every single spread. I don't know how anyone approved that, but this text in particular says, "P is for Prue, trampled flat in a brawl," and it's just this kid reaching up, getting ready to open a door to a saloon. And so you as the viewer have to do all the work. You have to put it all together of what is getting ready to happen and how does that relate to the text. It's so good and
That's
so
great.
Subtle. I really love it.
Yeah,
I love it. It's really beautifully done. It's brilliant. I mean, you're taking the text and doing something so creative with it. I mean, it'd be so easy, and especially with that text that's so active, to be tempted to draw the feet and, do all the stuff, and just to have that really subtle sort of moment. It's just really, really nice. And so, it provides this kind of potential energy. There's something about when you just feel it, that something's about to happen, and it adds something.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Each of those 3 moments has its own sort of flavor, in my opinion. Like, you're totally right. Like the before moment has this kinetic energy, this potential that's going to happen. And then the during an event is really active. If somebody gets, falls overboard on a kayak or something like that, you draw the picture of them falling in. It's very active. There's hands going everywhere. The paddle might be flying, the boat's flipping, very active, kind of engaged scene. And then the after tends to be a little bit quieter too, because the event has already taken place. And now we're sort of surveying the carnage or whatever the scene was. And so I just love that they have different flavors, and you can play around with those flavors, going back to what is being talked about in the chat right now, between the brainstorming and the thumbnailing. This is how I thumbnail. It's like, okay, which one of these moments is the best one? And so I actually have a little kind of a row, like this is the before the moment, this is during, this is after. And that's a great way to do it, because then you're just getting all kinds of ideas. You can have 3 versions, like using my kayak example, you have 3 distinct shots there of right before the kayak tips over, while it's tipping over, and then what happened to the person and dog that was in there after. And so it gives you, for every idea you have, you get 3 versions of it. So you can really start to work through a bunch of ideas. I will say this too. A lot of people saying they're stuck at the thumbnailing phase and have trouble going to the final. I will say everyone has that problem. And as a cheesy sales pitch, that is why I made my design class, is to get you from the thumbnail to where you're painting. I'm not going to, it's not
Smart.
It's called Sketch Smart, designing your way to killer illustrations. And something like that. It's pretty close to that.
We were trying so hard. What's the tagline for this? And for a long time, we're like, it's the illustration cheat code, or it makes illustrating so easy. It feels like you're cheating.
Yeah.
Like it really is. I've been looking at what Lee's been sharing with me. Like, hey, look at this. Some of the videos and the artwork, and it really does. I'm like, you have figured out a cheat code, Lee.
It is. It's the middle portion, because like what I've seen is like people are pretty good at the thumbnailing, and typically, especially at SVS where we've trained painting so much, people are good at the painting. But what happens between the thumbnail and the painting, where you solve all these problems, is the portion that I wanted to address. And so that's
it's really
is
cool.
What that's about. Yeah, it's fun. I've learned a lot from my own.
Really quick, that's related to this. Yeah.
What's that?
So I said, we've got a question that's related to this.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
It's from Erin. She says, what is the list of no-nos when it comes to publishing? I just read a newsletter from Penguin Random House that talks about trends. just wondering what to avoid when thinking of concepts and pitching ideas. So kind of related to this, it's like when you're coming up with ideas for not just an illustration, but maybe a whole children's book, how do you steer away from the cliche, and how do you like drive towards something that's new and interesting for publishers?
Well, I mean, I think solving that in the individual image, like we were talking about before, these design prompts are training for the overall projects. It's very hard to do a big project and fix all the stuff that if you can't do it in an individual project, an individual image rather. So practicing that in individual images for sure. What to avoid, I think it's getting better now. There was a group of probably 5 years where it didn't seem like you could do anything but a biography, in my opinion, in publishing without offending someone. It went through a really weird period where all of a sudden the creativity, people were easily offended by a lot of stuff. And it didn't used to be that way. I mean, look at that image I showed earlier from Edward Gorey. That would have never been published. I think John Klassen is helping the situation with some of his creativity and the books that he's doing.
Yeah, and Mac Burnett is now that isn't he the children's ambassador for this year?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he always talks about the need for kids to be able to be scared, that they want to be scared. They want to have some of this freedom of creativity within the picture book. And definitely the pendulum had kind of swung far in terms of that. I guess for me, I think of when you're trying to come up with ideas, when you start looking at, oh, well, everybody's doing fairy tales. Well, you have to remember these are all books that are coming out about fairy tales that have been in the works for 2 years. So maybe it's okay to then do the opposite. I mean, there really is no formula to follow. I do think you could kind of harm yourself by avoiding things because you think, well, everybody's doing books about unicorns, so maybe I should do a book about a unicorn. Well, maybe do the opposite of that. And you don't know, and every publisher is different. I just think that can really inhibit you from potentially creating a really great project. If you have some ideas, just throw them out there. I think it could be problematic if you're trying to go with what's currently around. Sorry, I have to take a sip of water.
No, that's a go ahead.
I was going to say, I think you need to be 80% yourself and 20% tactical with it and like strategic. Okay. Mm-hmm. And by that, I mean, like, I think regardless of the trends, one of the most successful series lately has been like the Grumpy Monkey series, right?
Yeah.
And that one feels very authentic and unique to the creators, but also like monkeys are perennial. Like everybody's publishing a monkey book every year. Someone is, right? There's always a monkey.
Since somewhere. Curious George, monkeys have been
Curious
around.
George, we've had monkeys, right? And it's the same with bears. You're always going to see bears, and I guess unicorns are like the new thing, and in the last 10 years maybe. So essentially, that's the strategic part. Is like, monkeys always seem to sell. Let's do a book about a monkey. How do we make it unique? Let's do a book about. And then I guess the other tactical thing is emotions. Explaining emotions and dealing with emotions is another thing for kids. And so how do we make that unique? Let's make it unique with the art style. Let's make it unique with the storytelling. And that's where the you comes into play.
And I think another thing I have to just say really quickly, because it made me think about that as well, in terms of publishing and ideas for books, if you're thinking for international foreign rights pickups. That is why rhyming books can be a very hard sell. And it's not just because rhyming books can be done in a way that everybody has kind of easily done rhyming books. But in terms of when you're translating the rhyming book, you cannot translate that well into another language. And so if you're thinking about a publisher that may want to pick up a book that has chances to be picked up by foreign rights, a rhyming book is going to be a horrible book to have picked up because it doesn't translate always as a rhyme in another language. And so these are kind of little things that I had never thought about before, but just having an awareness of kind of what your intentions are globally in terms of when you're pitching a project.
I want to throw out another tip too, and that is you could go to Barnes and Noble and you're going to see what's been selling, like either what came out that month, but also kind of what's been selling that year. And really you're 2 to 4 years behind when you're looking at Barnes and Noble. Mm-hmm. The next closest thing is to get access to the catalogs that publishers put out every season. And so Penguin Random House will put out their spring catalog, and Simon & Schuster is going to put out their summer catalog. And in there, you can download these PDFs if you know where to look online. Just probably Google search will get you there. But in there, you're going to see what's coming out in the coming seasons, like what's coming out 6 months from now. And that gets you closer to what's a little bit more trending. You can kind of see where the trending is going, but still that is way out from what agents and editors are looking for right now. So the next place to look is websites like Publishers Weekly, where they announce deals, and they'll announce deals as they happen. Not every deal gets announced, but it's usually deals that are announced when an agent wants the world to know that a deal was made. Kind of gives them credibility, and it gives their, it gets people looking at their clients in a more credible way and whatnot. And so you can go in there and see, oh, so-and-so is, sold the rights to a book, and it might tell a little bit about what that book is, maybe not give the title, or it might tell what genre it is. And that gives you another kind of idea of what people are looking at, what people are buying. But ultimately in children's publishing, having an agent is super helpful, because the agent is so dialed in to what's going on. They're talking to everybody. They're talking to other agents. They know what deals didn't happen, what deals did happen. They're talking to editors. They're having lunches and meetings and dinners. So that's kind of your inside. And when you can go to an agent and say, oh, I've got this great idea for unicorn, they'll say, I don't know anybody that's buying a unicorn book right now,
Yeah. And I even learned that myself I created, and you've seen, Jake, because it had translucent arms and you didn't want the translucent arms
right. Yeah.
of my pig character. But I learned a new kind of lesson in that regard, where I was privy to the fact that pigs are really a hard sell, because for international sales, it really, depending on the culture of who's buying the book, a pig can be seen in a light that would not be of interest to buy that book. And so pigs are not as appealing, even though you've got the like Olivia, and you have the staples that have been around for so long. There are certain animals that are going to be a harder sell. And that's not something that, even this was just a few months ago, I had not even thought about. And I wouldn't have known had I not had those conversations with my agent and with potential publishers, that this animal might not be the best choice for that. And it's just exactly what you said, Jake, about these are kinds of conversations and information that you get as a result of those kind of meetings.
Do you guys think about this stuff? I got to admit that I don't pay any attention to what's coming out when I'm thinking of the stories that I want to do.
No, I don't anymore. I used to, and I realized that it really hasn't moved the needle for me in getting picture books picked up. I've actually done it less now, and I've gone to the past, and I have just started really focusing more on the books of the past to give me inspiration. I've actually intentionally started to remove myself from looking too much at what's coming out, because for the longest time, I thought that was going to clue me in to getting key success like pickups, but that hasn't proven to be worthy. So.
Yeah, and everybody has a different take. I mean, like, I remember I did a book, a pitch a couple of years ago now, 2 years ago, that was about these little creatures that steal and eat your dreams, and then submitted it to some publisher. He's like, oh no, we don't do books about dreams. So don't do that anymore. It's just like this blanket statement. And I just thought it was so silly. I mean, like, how do you anticipate that? And so now no one can write a story about anything to do with dreaming. It seems arbitrary and silly.
Unless
so
you're Dan Santat and you do Beagle, which is essentially his imaginary friend in a way from Dreamland. You know?
Somehow that's okay, but yeah, I mean, but I just take it with a grain of salt. Like everybody's got their own little opinions. I mean, I had one art director say like, don't use whatever you do on this book cover, don't use green. And I was like, whoa, is there a marketing reason? Why am I not using green? She's like, I hate green.
And that is something I want to bring up really quickly because I've seen that in the SVS community where I'll see students that really are petrified because they'll learn from a particular publisher that we don't like dot eyes. And so then there's this sudden urge to, I better just completely change up my eyes to normal eyes. But then you're ultimately going to find another publisher that says, I don't like the big eyes. So don't worry so much about what one publisher says because it's not the rule that is across the board. I do dot eyes. I do dot eyes.
So for those of you guys who aren't being able to see this chat, does the chat show up on YouTube? I can't remember if that does.
No.
But
No, it does
if you guys aren't seeing that, what we're talking about is, we started out with a unicorn, and then the idea of what would a unicorn with multiple horns be, and then we started talking about what would a corn with a horn be called, and there's just a lot of discussion about unicorns and corn just in general.
I don't have the chat open because if I do, see the three of you, so I'm just oblivious.
I've been sliding it over back and forth on my
It's pretty funny. My thought was a unicorn, a piece of corn with a horn would have to be called a corn, because and then Jake said a good title would be a forlorn unicorn with no horn. So this is the kind of banter that you get with.
How does that translate internationally, though?
Yeah, there's no way.
Just
should we die? We've exhausted that topic. Should we go on with the top mistakes from How to Fix Your Art? And
I want to hear the next one.
Okay, so we've sort of gone over the three different things with story, which is confusing situation, not interesting enough or cliche, and then the last one was too much story. The next thing we start getting into, and this is an order of importance in my opinion. I'm sure anybody could have any version of how this list should go, but in my opinion, design and composition is the next thing. So you've come up with a concept, and then now you got to draw it out. The first thing that comes into play is design and composition. And the number one thing that I see that doesn't work with new artists and illustrators that could make improvements is weak silhouettes and shapes and how those shapes read. Do you agree with that, Jake? What's a good silhouette?
Good silhouette. So there's a whole kind of what would you call it? Like a approach to silhouette where it goes down to basic shapes and opening areas, like areas of negative space. So bad silhouette is not going to have any really negative space, and it's just going to be kind of blobby. But a good silhouette is you could see very specific shape. You can see the shape language for the character from just the silhouette. And you think about like Mickey Mouse, the three circles, right? It's so iconic that people find Mickeys all over the place, even if they're not intentional, because when three circles just kind of line up, you see a Mickey Mouse.
It's an instant read, right?
Right. And so if you think about basic shapes, but then also your character is in a pose that were you to black it out or just to see the shadow of it, you could still tell that they're reaching for something or they're expressing a certain kind of emotion somehow. And I think once you can like master those two things, it's going to help the read of the illustration overall.
Yeah. One thing I want to.
Oh, wow, Liam, you and I are just wanting to jump.
Go ahead, jump in. It's your.
And
your turn.
I just would say to expand on that, it's just kind of reaching beyond what you think. So in terms of if you're showing someone reaching for an object out of a cabinet, it can often look kind of static and almost like a catalog pose, but like just push it further than you think you need to push it to just really show that more in the illustration.
Perfect. Yep. One of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about was silhouette. I mean, immediately when I say silhouette, most people are going to think of, what's my character doing? Which is, that makes sense. But the way that I'm thinking of silhouette now is actually a little bit different. It's more global in terms of not necessarily what is my character doing, but what are all the shapes in a scene doing, and are they doing work for me with the way that I depicted them, or are they confusing the situation, whether it's a boat or a background or a set of clump of trees, a house. And so now I'm building my whole image. Whenever I'm making an image, I'm building it with the idea of, does this shape read in its entirety, whether it's the character that's in the scene or not? Does this car, with the angle that I drew it, read as a car, as a silhouette? And it's a game changer when you start thinking that way globally on an illustration. A lot of times when students here fix the silhouette, they fix the character, but the other stuff doesn't read. And so I just wanted to say that it's not just a character, it's the whole thing. And that to me, that means dark shapes on light backgrounds and light shapes on dark backgrounds, and how those two interact. If you guys have heard the term figure ground relationship, you guys remember that from art school? It's basically just the overall light and dark pattern within an image. And man, if you nail that in a couple of shapes. One of the things I did for my class, which it's such a fun exercise. I'm actually going to show this in the pro demo next week. But some of the best images that I've been able to find, I basically reduced them to a figure ground relationship, only black and only white. And almost all of them only had 5 shapes when you group them that way. And so all of a sudden, when I see something like that, I think, okay, there's something I can grab onto. Doesn't mean you have to only use 5 shapes, but it probably means I shouldn't use 20 individual shapes, which don't read that well by themselves. You know what I mean? And so you can simplify quite a bit in an image.
Yeah, I really want to apply that to the 3D work now that you're saying it. My mind is just like...
Come to the lecture I think it's on Monday. It's on the 8th. Which day is that? I'm going to do a pro demo. This one's going to be available for everybody too. So, but it'll probably have already happened by the time this comes out. But for those of you guys who are in the community, it's going to be it's just one specific lesson from the design workshop that is based on this, like how to think about silhouette in a global capacity, not just your character. So it should be pretty fun.
Cool.
Okay. So the next design problem that I see, and this one's a big one. It's telling me my internet is unstable. So tell me if I'm conking out. But the next thing is a lack of a true focal point. And this is what we see so much. And it sort of goes in line with adding too much story can take away. So, you know, some of the stuff from the first section, the story, if you add too much story, you can sort of confuse of where we're supposed to look. And so, you know, thinking about ways to, like, I've drawn this scene and I've got this character doing something in the scene. Now, how do I make people look there? So you can see sort of how we walk down this road. Like step 1 is, what are they doing? Step 2 is, you know, where do I put them? And then step 3 is, how do I get people to look there? And so your options are, it's contrast, of course. It's going to be saturation of color. It's going to be an interesting design shape or silhouette, or a combination of all of these things. But a lot of times we don't see that in an illustration. Just they put something happening in one area, but then there's other stuff happening in another area, and then there's other stuff happening in another area, and you have no idea of which one of those comes first.
Yeah, I agree. That's a fair assessment.
How do you get around that?
Well, I mean, I look at it in terms of, it's just letting go of babies, because I think a lot of times you can just get kind of too hyper-focused into everything having detail and everything being so important that it's hard to let go of things that need to let go. And I always just look at what's the most important essence of the story, and let's just take away anything that's not needed to just really hone us down to what's the focus for that illustration. And in terms of 3D, I will often do that in regards to the directional lines of the objects I'm placing. The light is going to be focused where I really want you to look, and it might mean that the objects surrounding are going to be muted out. I'm just going to do whatever I can to get you to look where I want to look, but it also means that I have to be okay with just letting go a lot of the unnecessary. And that can be very hard when you're starting out to let go.
Do you think, and this is just a question, I haven't really answered it for myself, but do you think there's a certain amount of, when you're new in illustration or just starting out, there's a certain insecurity to letting something be by itself And so you want to add more stuff because it's sort of baked out of insecurity that I just need to show more. I need to show people I can draw. Need to show people that I can think about these things in all these different ways. I can add all this stuff. And also like new people who are on the outside of the art world, the general viewers, they will a lot of times give people compliments. There's the two compliments that I always see is, wow, that looks just like a photograph, which I now consider to be an insult. and the other one is, wow, look at all that detail.
Yeah.
And so you get sort of rewarded.
Yeah, of course you're going to equate that with then meaning that you're really good. And I have now finally, and I was victim of that for the longest time because the insecurities would set in as I'm wanting to do more simple images because I think, well, they're not complicated enough and people are going to go, oh, those are so easy. And
you're
my
a fraud.
My motto now is I work so hard to make it look so easy. And that's a skill in itself. And it just takes some confidence to be able to be okay with that's my goal. And it's just, have you kind of gone through that whole thing?
It does. It takes a huge amount of confidence to leave an entire area with nothing in it. I mean, it's really hard. I always think Jamie Zollers, who taught the book class with me, she's such a good illustrator. She has the natural tendency to fill everything with detail. And that's sort of what people love about her work. And I love it about her work too. But she looks at other people and she would say, oh, I wish I could do these simple images. And then she would leave this big sky or something and it would be by itself. And then she'd put a bird in it. And then she's like, okay, it's a whole flock of birds. And she just has to keep adding. It's just her natural sort of tendency. It's really hard to leave it open, depending on your tendency.
When I was, I think it was the Christmas I was in 6th grade, my dad got me for Christmas The Wonderful World of Michael Whelan. It was an art book. And if you don't know who Michael Whelan is, he's a fantasy illustrator, fantasy mostly, but sci-fi as well. He's an illustrator for book covers. He's maybe the most famous book cover illustrator of the 20th century. He's still working now too. Recently has been doing covers for Brandon Sanderson's books as well. But I got this book and it was so eye-opening for me because I still have the book to this day. It's one of my favorite books. It would show the final painted illustration, but it was bigger than you would see it on the novel. So it was a good big book like that. And it was a nice scan or a photograph or something, because I think he painted fairly large. But then the previous page would be like, here's all my notes, the illustration notes, like how he came about coming to this illustration. And then usually some of his thumbnails and some of like the paths he didn't take. And for a 6th grader, how old are you in 6th grade? Like 11 years old? For me to see that at that age, it was like, oh, this is how a professional illustrator works. I get it. Like they do these thumbnails. They have, he has a clear focal point. He has a clear composition going on, but then also to go back to the point of not having too much space in there, he always had to leave room for the title of the book. And so all of his illustrations have this 1/3 of the illustration is just sky, or it's just rock or something like that. So you could have that title over the top. And so I think that seeps into my work to this day, because I saw all of his illustrations more without the words on them than I ever saw them with the words on them.
I have to look at that.
I don't know who that illustrator is, so I can't picture the images. Can you pull something up? I want to see sort of what that looks like.
I'm looking at it.
My
I didn't want to admit.
connection might be a little wobbly, but I'll see what I can do here.
I didn't want to admit that I didn't know him because of prior podcast episodes where I've said I don't know people.
Guys.
Totally know him.
Michael Whelan. You guys are gonna love this. He really should be. His work doesn't quite overlap with what you guys do, but I still feel like every illustrator should know about him a little bit.
Yeah, I just haven't heard his name, so I don't know who he is. While you're pulling that up, I'll go into the next sort of flaw that I see in design and composition, and that is a centered composition or a composition that really just hasn't been thought about that much. But that typically shows up as a centered composition, and how that plays out, at least with students that I've seen building images when thumbnails and all that, is that they get so excited about the subject matter that they're going to paint that they just throw it in the center because they just want to get to painting. Oh yeah, I don't know this guy at all. Michael Wellen.
Oh wow. Yes.
Let's find his. Where would he keep his book covers? Here we go. So yeah, his career goes back to 1975, but let's just pick like 1987. Here's an example of one of his book covers. It's just a list. He's not.
Yeah, he needs
so much artwork.
He made this website in 1994.
Yeah, but you can see here how these compositions all have characters at the bottom, big open space at the top.
Yeah, I mean he's even at the thumbnail stage, which is what we're seeing now. They're very. I mean, he's using a framing technique, which goes into exactly the topic I'm talking about now, and that's a lot of the times. Like I said, there's two reasons that people use compositions that they do. One is they get so excited about the subject matter that they just put it right in the dead center. And two is they don't have a formal set of compositions to work through, meaning I basically have 7 proven compositions that I know work, and I've labeled them. And so say I have an idea and I've got a character and a scene in mind, and I might run my thumbnail through each one of these compositions to see which one is the best one, just in thumbnail. But I think a lot of times you're just basically, you start with a thumbnail, which is a big empty rectangle, right? And you're just like, okay, I don't know where I'm going to put this thing, but you start drawing a character somewhere. And it's lack of a formality or lack of training or lack of a plan. And that's basically most people's compositional defaults. And so that's just what I see happening quite a bit.
Yeah. I think a really good book is that picture that's Lee. I think it's our connection. I think maybe. I keep jumping in. Right?
No, I just talk too much too. So
there's that book that I go back to all the time called Picture This, which is huge for that, where they go over composition in terms of really communicating what the necessary emotion is for that particular image, and by the placement of your objects, whether it's on the top or the bottom, or you can really create tension or create peace and calm. And so there's a lot more to where you place your elements in your picture
and the shapes that you're using, right?
And the shapes that you're using. And yeah, so it's a whole nother bag of thinking for.
But it's great if you have those in, like, I love making little, I almost think of them almost as like a menu. Like if you go into Subway and you're going to make your sub sandwich and you've got your options. That's how I think of illustration. Like I've got this idea and now I've got these sort of boxes I can check. Let me try this. Let me try this. Let me try this. It takes the pressure away from me a little bit. And I just can run through these tests. And normally when I'm running through these little thumbnail tests, I'll either have a better idea or something will click on one of them. You're like, yep, that's the one. And I didn't have to think of it. You know what I mean? I didn't have to pull it out of the ether. Yeah. It just landed sort of on a system that I guess that's what it is. It's a system that I built for walking through some of this stuff. And I think that can help anybody. If you're always starting from nothing when you're making an image, that's the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, do we want to wrap it up there? We've been at this for about an hour, and we've got another meeting.
I've got 20 other categories.
Oh man, we're gonna have to do a part 2 on this.
Let me ask the chat a question real quick. What do you guys think of this information? Would you want a part 2 to this? Because I really do have a huge list here. Is it worth it?
Fun? I think it would be fun.
I like talking about this kind of stuff. It makes it clarifies it for me on what do I do when using color. Is there anything that I do? Is there a system that I can implement? Am I just picking colors randomly out of the box like a box of crayons? Yeah.
It's still interesting looking at these Michael Wellen paintings again, because I'm still over here on his website. Were you able to see when I was sharing my screen?
Yeah.
because I got this book at such a young age, I don't realize what an influence this guy has been on me now. Just looking at these, because you kind of outgrow some of your younger influences, right? And you move on to other things, and you get into different stuff as a teenager and in your 20s and whatever. But like, I'm looking at some of this stuff, I'm like, he does all my hallmarks. Like a guy writing, there's dragons. There's also like cool sci-fi vehicles. There's a guy who's got like a mounted, almost like a bird of prey ostrich type of thing, and he's running around. And I've drawn so many of these, like a giant bird or a dinosaur with a saddle on the back.
Do you feel like you looked at enough of his images where you're sort of channeling that without thinking about it?
Absolutely. Yep. I didn't realize it. Looking at this, I'm just like, this stuff's so cool.
Well, I think Brahm is channeling him too.
Brahm?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's almost the same.
Brahm is standing on this guy's shoulders, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there is no Brahm without this guy, which I didn't know, which is interesting because I like Brahm's work. It's nothing like what I paint, but I really like it. I think he's really good.
Yeah, my younger self clearly had clues that I didn't realize were, I mean, look at this. This is one of my favorite books, and that's not a surprise. And my younger self clearly knew me more than I knew myself until I was 50, but it's all there. It's all there.
Real.
That's so funny.
I remember him talking about this particular illustration in the Art of Book and reading it as a kid. And he's like, I could not figure out how to draw the ocean waves just coming up over the sand, or how to paint it. And he's like, I painted over that spot so many times. And he said, I finally went out to the ocean and started taking photographs and looking at it. And he said, I realized the one thing I wasn't doing was adding a little shadow underneath all the bubbles, because the bubbles actually cast a shadow like a centimeter underneath. And he's like, once I did that, it's like, oh, this looks real.
That's so interesting. He's doing so many things right here formally in that image that you were showing right there. His composition is on the golden triangle, which I'll show you guys later. He's using framing for his composition as well, which is a really well-known book cover technique where you basically build a frame around your character. Look at where he is. He's using the highest contrast and the most interesting area all around the character. I mean, it's just case in point illustration. You know what I mean? It's like all the things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah. So good.
It's so easy. Let me leave people with one more tip. And this one's a big one, and it could change people's submission maybe for this time.
Can you say
what is the how to fix your art prompt this month? I can't remember.
This next one, the most recent one that we're doing is actually kind of a return to critique arena. So it's a before and after.
That's right.
Taking one that you did before
and fixing it. Okay. Well, then this applies to that one for sure. My next tip is just about lighting. And that is, I see a lot of people try to include multiple light points in an illustration. And so you might have the moonlight, a light inside a house that's inside interior lit, and then a street light all in the same scene. And the problem typically is that all of them are at the same intensity. And so if you are picking multiple light sources and putting it doesn't mean you can't do that. It just means there needs to be the number one light source, and that's typically where we're looking. So again, highlighting the focal point. And then the other two light sources get pushed way back into the atmosphere. So they illuminate a little bit, but they're not all spotlights. And I see that quite a bit where somebody's like, oh, there's just lights everywhere. And so it just looks too glaring, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Easy one to fix.
Excellent. This is some great tips, Lee.
Thank you.
Good job.
All right. Yeah, I appreciate that. It was good. I told Lee I'm just out of bandwidth today. I can't come up with an idea. And can you think of something? He's like, I got you, fam.
That was so quick too. It's very impressive. And this is perfect.
I'm thinking about all this stuff too anyway for my class. And so it's helpful.
It's good. It's good. I'll take us out. Okay. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Today, 3-Point Perspective is made possible by SVSLEARN. We're becoming a great illustrator starts. Your hosts today were Samantha Cotterill, Lee White, and myself, Jake Parker. just want to shout out everybody at SVSLEARN helps make this possible. Podcast produced by Daniel Tu. Team manager Preston Smith, keeper of the curriculum Austin Shirtlift, show notes wrangler Lily Howell, chief operations officer Lisa Fott, our illustrator Annalise Black. Now go draw something.
Oh wait, do we need to jump into it with a formal intro?
Yes.
It's a podcast.
I'm really sorry about this. My dog is like on edge right now. He's about to bark and it's going to ruin it. I just have to take care of him really quick. So you guys do hit some song and dance. I'm going to take care of him, okay? I can hear him out there just being like,
Oh, Lee. So for everybody on YouTube, in case this is going to be part of the episode, we've just seen Magic Wonder from
I
Lee.
removed my finger. I tell you, that was when my son finally figured out that was not really happening, one of the saddest things ever. Because I always had that, and he was always like super into it, like, oh my gosh. And then one time he's like, Dad, that's just your thumb. I was like, oh no. The other thing that I used to do like that really bummed me out when he figured it out was, the volume control on your steering wheel. Well, he could never see that, and he's strapped in the back seat. So, and he can see that I'm not messing with the radio. So I would go like this, and I would turn up the sound, and I would turn it down with my hand like this.
You know what is so funny? I did that with the garage door because they didn't know about the garage door opener, and I would say, nice. And they'd be like, whoa. And then they're like, down.
Oh, it's great. And then one time he's like, Dad, I see you pressing it with the steering wheel. And I was like, oh, sucks.
Oh my goodness.
all right, let's do our intro. You ready?
All right.